doing right now actually doesn't do
it. Just makes it look really cool. That's exactly what I'm doing right now because you get a camera and But this I grew up with technology. All musical instruments are technology, really. It doesn't matter if it's a bit of wood that somebody carved into a violin and killed a cat to stick strings on. It's all technology. It's just I happen to be born around a time when this sort of stuff came in, and I wasn't very good at my piano lessons, put it that way, but I was very good at computers, and that came out, and I started making music with computers and with synthesizers. And I really started out as a synth programmer for other composers. I worked for Michael Kamen and Stanley Myers and people like that.
So what exactly? So the things that are on the wall right now for people who are
okay, all right, okay. These things are oscillators, which you plug into filters, which it really what it does is a synthesizer. Can synthesizes out of the components that a sound is made out of. So you can, they used to tell you in the 70s and the 80s that anything that's in your head you could synthesize. Well, it's not quite like that. There are limitations, and at the end of the day, you go to the piano, which is 600 years of technology. Refined technology, and you play one note and it sounds fabulous. And it's a lot less of a struggle. But I hear the world probably more than I see it, and for instance, on Sherlock, I was very much thinking about, it was a time before computers. It was the industrial age. There was a lot of huffing and puffing going on, and steam and stuff like that. I like creating these sort of sonic landscapes, and this stuff helps. Plus, this stuff sort of helps me to think differently. There's something very physical about moving jack plugs around as opposed to sitting there with your mouse in front of a keyboard.
No, definitely. Can we look at what's on this wall over here?
Okay, this is it's sort of all more of the same, and it's plus the old thing, those that die with the most toys win. And I bought a lot of this. People. There was a time, when everybody got into digital synthesis and and people were just chucking this stuff away. Actually, this wall, at one point, this is one of the great synthesizers, it's a Roland synthesizer, and through one way or the other, I found out that Roland had a warehouse full of this stuff which they couldn't sell, and I phoned them up and I said, "How much do you want for it?" And they go, "Well, if you take everything, we'll sell it to you by the pound." Actually, it was the kilo, but for $25 a kilo. Which is ridiculous because now, of course, how time catches up with things, and now it's unaffordable.
So, what year did you buy all this?
This was probably early '80s. It was just that transition period, where everybody went, no, it's got to be modern, it's got to be digital. That's the future, and let's just junk all the old stuff.
Can you, for yourself, obviously I might not be able to tell, but can you hear the difference between all these different pieces of instrumentation?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can. I absolutely can. I'm a nerd. You can put on a record and I can go, oh, yeah, EMS VCS3. Oh, yes. Okay, ARP 2600. Moog ladder filter. Yes. Okay. It's a terrible thing to admit to. Like it just points to a waste of childhood. But
Yeah, but you're very good at your job, and I think that everyone who's exceptionally talented at their job knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And really honestly, I love this stuff. Knobs and buttons and stuff like this. It's all really good. And look, I started my career out. The people who really gave me George Martin was one of the first person, the people to give me a job. The man had produced the Beatles. It was amazing hanging out with those guys and being able to ask them questions. How did you mic the drums, or etc. etc. And I come from a technological family, so there was never any great difference between music and technology. And I think the reason I went into music was because I didn't have to be in competition with my dad, who was a scientist. But it could have gone the other way. And so I feel very at home with this sort of stuff.
Well, what's also interesting is if we go over to the computers.
Yeah. Don't fall. Right. Don't worry. It's not, and at the same time, I mean, you got like, Austrian art up on the walls, and you got a lot of books, and
you can never go wrong with Vienna. One of the best.
No, absolutely. And I ask myself, why such a small city with such a diverse population could come up with so much art and culture, and modern thought, modern philosophy. How come, this is so off the topic, but outside Vienna, in a small Austrian town, I mean, village. In the village school, at one point, Ludwig Wittgenstein, our great philosopher, must have been playing on the schoolyard with Adolf Hitler. What's the possibility that two people who have influenced our world in such a dramatic way would be playing in the schoolyard in some little village? What's the chances of that?
Well, Vienna also has a long, Austria has a long history with music, with
absolutely. Absolutely.
There's obviously something in the water there.
Right. Well, there's something in the water, and they didn't really go and make anything else. It's like, look, it's like Hollywood. We don't really make anything here other than we're good at making movies, and we're probably very good at having too many lawyers as well. But, other than that, it's sort of a useless town. And I don't mean that in a totally derogatory way, only in a slightly derogatory way.
Well,
and the sun shines.
Yeah, the weather here is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I look around, I see all these keyboards, and I see a Mac, and I see this, the monitor, and this Hewlett Packard, I believe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and everything makes a horrible noise, or noise of one way or the other. This guy's obviously not doing anything.
How did you decide on the equipment?
Just to scare the children.
How did you decide? Obviously, I'm sure you have your pick of which technology you want to use. How did you decide on the stuff that we're looking at right now?
A lot of it, we build out a lot of our technology here because the problem is the imagination is always a little ahead of the people who actually go and make things and sell it commercially. Like these touch screens, etc., are really, I was just thinking after a while, why am I doing everything with a mouse? I mean, do things with a touch screen. I mean, I got all these fingers to do things with, and it's a very easy way of reconfiguring something.
Is this the actual place where you compose stuff? Is this the seat that you use, or
this is it. This is it. This is pretty much it. But I mean, to be really honest, most of the writing happens in my head, and I try not to really touch this thing, the keyboard, until I know roughly what I want to write about, because otherwise, look, everybody has access to the same 12 notes here, and you're just flailing about all day, and anything, yes, everything becomes a sort of a pretty tune, but it doesn't have a point of view, so you have to go and, you have to figure out what you want to write about, and then the notes sort of, after a long, big neurotic struggle, suddenly start falling into place.
So what happens? Do you look at the footage on, say, one of these monitors as you're composing? How does it exactly work? And how did it work for Sherlock Holmes?
Actually, Sherlock Holmes was different insofar that it's exactly how you describe it. Usually the way it works with me is it starts off with a conversation with the director. And it usually starts off before he goes out and shoots a movie. We're at least starting to figure out our language. We're at least trying to figure out our sort of sonic world and what we're trying to write about. Sherlock Holmes is different because I just got a phone call one day from Guy Ritchie going, "Hey, I'm doing this Sherlock Holmes movie, and every time I go into the cutting room, they keep putting more and more Dark Knight music all over it, and I don't like it." Which was for me, a perfect way of starting a conversation, because the last thing I wanted to do was do Dark Knight Part 2 in Victorian England. So plus look, Sherlock's a comedy, whichever way you look at it, and Dark Knight is definitely, I wasn't worried about protecting many jokes in that one. So I went over and I looked at it, and I looked at it very, with a slight European dubiousness. The whole thing, I had grown up with the Sherlock Holmes stories, and I loved the Sherlock Holmes stories, and I had heard rumors of a guy who I'd never met wanting to do this sort of action-y version of Sherlock. And the thing, of course, which attracted me to Sherlock Holmes was, that intelligence as adventure, what the synapses firing in the guy's brain as exciting as a car chase. I mean, that's what, so, but within 20 minutes, Guy had me because he had that device he uses where you hear Sherlock Holmes describing what he's going to do next, the slow-mo pre-visualizations. I thought, wow, he's actually solved how to do that. And and then I knew I wanted to do quirky, and I knew, and so much of this stuff, you're asking, am I looking at the picture on the monitor? Yes, I am, from a certain point on. But most of it is, it's like remembering key images and writing from there, and try to come up with the sound and try to come up with the tune.
Well, one of the things I really like about the film, especially, and it's very memorable, is how that score at the beginning. It's very overpowering. It's very, I mean, you've entered a different world.
Well, yeah, and we fought for that. I mean, the look, I don't know if I want to be controversial or whatever. I certainly don't mind being polarizing. I think you got to be hot or cold. You can't be lukewarm. And it is a quirky score, and it is a powerful score, and it doesn't hide. It doesn't do. People always think, good film music is music that sort of homogeneously floats around in the background and supports the scenes in a sort of a gentle way. That's not what I was trying to do in Sherlock Holmes. It was very outspoken. It was very much with a point of view. It was pretty bold. Okay. And very different, very, very different. And at the same time, and this is more for an audience to say, I think it was the right thing to do on that movie. I think it gave it a color that you wouldn't have gotten had I just gone down had I trudged down the path of doing, Victorian or Elgar or any of the great classical English music, and gone down that sort of road.
No, totally. And to be really honest with you, while Avatar is getting a lot of press right now for the visuals, no disrespect to the music on that, I don't remember it. It doesn't stand out. And in respect to your score, it is very, very much it adds that third dimension to the film.
Well, you have to have a director who has that sort of courage, and who wants to go there and goes, okay, we're going to go bold. We're going to go and be provocative. And completely gets that, once you start going down that path, you can't go and turn back, because it's the whole idea of Sherlock was, I wanted to bring in these great soloists and really let them be virtuosic and let you hear let them be as expressive as possible. So you can't turn human expression down. You either take it out or you play it boldly. And we settled for playing it boldly. And there were a couple of arguments with people who shall remain nameless and people who got a little worried. And there was a point which was super duper terrifying for both Guy and me, where we had to go and preview the music for the score because it was so different, look, this was Warner Brothers' Christmas movie, right? And here's a guy, I don't know how much a movie costs, but a movie costs $100 million if if anything costs anything anymore these days, who was putting banjos and out of tune pianos into this $100 million Christmas spectacular. And yeah, there we were in Arizona, and playing it, and then the focus group, them asking, well, did you like the music? And that moment between that and the question being asked, was the longest time I spent in hell. It was only a second, but it felt like 8 years of purgatory.
Which it's very interesting that you say this, because your resume is very impressive, and you've been doing this for a very long time. Yet it sounds to me like you're just as nervous as you were.
It's yes. I mean, every movie starts the same way. I have no idea what to do, and I have no idea how to do it. Plus, I don't know where the music comes from. I don't know the mechanics of why somebody can think of a tune and why somebody can't. So, what if they turn off the tap? Right? So and the job is slightly different because you're supposed to go and do something. You're supposed to invent. That's really what they're asking you to do. And not only invent any old thing, it's supposed to be appropriate for whatever we're working on. And it's supposed to be something that nobody else can imagine. I mean, if I ask an audience, what's the music you want to hear in Sherlock Holmes? I mean, they'll very quickly tell me what it would be, right? But that's not my job. My job is to do the unimaginable.
I definitely know, and I'll definitely say it, that Mr. Nolan wants nothing revealed about Inception.
Yes.
I don't want to know anything story related. But I am curious, the teaser trailer had this amazing sound in it. Like this I don't know if it was your music or whose music was it, but I'm curious if that is the kind of tone with the music that could you talk about that kind of
effect? Well, the sound's actually written in Chris's script. I mean, quite honestly, I mean that's Chris's writing, and it's very much his direction. And the trailer is half the trailer house, and I don't actually know who the composer was. And then we took it over and we started adding things to it as well. Especially because I believe the trailer house or the composer never got to read the script. So he doesn't quite know what he's supposed to be doing and what it's all about. And we're not going to tell you.
Well, and I don't want to know.
No, I know. Yeah. Because the great thing is, and we did that with Dark Knight, we worked in such privacy. And everybody knew, everybody knew it was going to be Batman and it was going to be the Joker. But they didn't know what Batman and what Joker. And I think there's something great about, especially in this day and age where everybody knows everything instantly over the internet. Isn't it nice when we can still surprise you?
Well,
and scare you a little.
That is actually what I'm most excited about. Is for me personally, I'm trying to find out nothing. I want to walk into that theater and know nothing.
Right.
I know it's not going to happen because they have to sell the movie in trailers and whatever else. But
we got to be cautious.
Yes, but saying that, I am curious. The score in that teaser is very. It's the sound is amazing.
But
and I'm curious about your writing process for it.
Well, I have to say I had very little to do with the trailer other than going, oh, those big bongs. Actually, I mean, those type of big bongs. But, curiously enough, I might be just starting to work on Inception. I knew what they were about, but my friend, partner, music producer Lon Balfe really, really got to grips with the trailer, and Chris is very collegial, and Chris and Lon get on really well as well. So it's like it is a team, and especially since so much of that came from the script, and Lon hadn't read the script, and I'm so going, no, just trust it, let's just,
totally
right. I need big boings here, right?
I'm very curious though, how long for say Sherlock Holmes, going back to Sherlock for a second, how long does it typically take you to write a score? And for Sherlock, how long did it take?
7 months. I was supposed to have 2 months or 3 months or something like that, and then I looked at the release date and it was Christmas. I'm going, why am I supposed to be finished 1st of August, guys? It takes as long as they give me. I have done movies in crazy record time, but I like the it could get better if you give me, look, the difference is, and it really is true, I mean, it's all the inspiration, the moment of inspiration is, a split second, you can't even measure it. But there's this other thing about just rolling up your sleeves and doing the work and spending the time with something and refining it. And you get better ideas and you get better, time is an important thing, and being able to say, to stretch the moment out for as long as possible before you say, oh, it's finished. Because somehow the hubris in my brain goes, if I don't say it's finished, I still leave the door open for a good idea to happen. And, as soon as I say it's finished and I listen back to it, it's just, oh, it's just Hans, it's just me again, but, I preclude the possibility that greatness could strike by saying it's finished. And so, at the end of the day, it's the studio that goes, okay, guys, we got a release date, let's get a move on here.
Totally. I know I have to wrap with you, but I do want to ask, obviously you're getting ready to start on Inception. Have you started or you're starting now?
I've started. I did, I saw Chris at the Sherlock Holmes premiere in London. I was more tired than I'd been, I think, ever in my life. I mean, I had worked for 7 months without a single day off. Lots of other complications that happened during that time. I can't. There was a whole period where I'd get home at about sort of 7 or 8 in the morning. I was burned. I was tired. I was going to take a serious holiday. I see Chris at the premiere, and as I see him, I'm getting an idea. And we were in the studio 2 days after the premiere, trying out the idea. So I'm my own worst enemy, which is a long way of answering. Yes, I'm working on it.
Well, what I was going with this is, what are you planning on doing after Inception? Have you lined up other gigs?
Yeah. I got a movie with my best friend Jim Brooks, Untitled Jim Brooks Project, as it's called on IMDb. So yes, something very different. And I'm doing another thing with Gore Verbinski called Rango, which is really interesting. Really, and I saw Gore last night, and So yeah. I'm not entirely out of work. I'm just out of sleep.
No, I understand. Well, I guess I do want to ask you. You've done some work on the Pirates franchise, just a touch.
Just a one or two. Yeah, right. Okay.
Just a touch. So I was curious. Are you thinking about? Are they going to have you back for the fourth one?
Gore and I were talking about that. Yeah, the way you're asking the question is absolutely right. Yes, of course I'm thinking about it, but at the same time, I'd love to see a script.
Right. Well, I think they're still not. They still have a very far away release date.
They have a far away. I think the release date just changed yesterday. I don't know for sure, but I heard a rumor that it might have gotten itself nailed down.
I think, wasn't it May of 2011 or July of 2011?
That's not that far away. Something like that. Yeah.
It's interesting. Actually, it's a very good call because there might be suffering. This is, of course, totally off subject, but they might be suffering from the Spider-Man 4 thing, where they are just like...
Funny you should say that. No. I just think, Spider-Man 4 isn't coming out when it's supposed to be coming out now, is it?
No, that movie has been nuked.
Exactly. So does that mean that a date is opened up?
Well, 2 movies have already moved to that date. The Thor and...
Right.
I think Pirates moved too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but that's been on... That was online, I think, 2 days ago.
Right, okay, but you see what I'm saying, so it's not that far away. Right. No, I'd love to see a script.
I understand. I have to wrap with you. I could talk to you for a very long time about a lot of movies, but I will say thank you so much for giving me your time.